Hello and welcome to Productivity Vybes, a production of the National Competitiveness and Productivity Council. Productivity Vybes is an informative magazine program on what's vibing in areas of productivity and competitiveness.
I'm innovative.
Yeah! I'm competitive!
I'm productive.
I am creative.
I constantly improve what I do and how I do it.
I am output-oriented.
I never stop learning.
I give of my best, always.
The National Competitiveness and Productivity Council, embracing excellence.
In our What's Trending segment, we take a look at the National Anti-Money Laundering Oversight Committee, NAMLOC. This committee was established by the Cabinet of Ministers to monitor St. Lucia's compliance with international anti-money laundering, counter-terrorist financing, and proliferation financing standards. Via amendments to several pieces of legislation, NAMLOC aims to nip money laundering, terrorist financing, and proliferation financing at its source.
One of the key items for us is public sensitization, because we note every time we do this dialogue with the public, there's still persons who say, but we are not familiar with the legislation that you just passed, or this is new to us. So we know as a committee that the public sensitization needs to continue. For example, the Virtual Assets Bill was recently passed. Virtual assets is new to St. Lucia in terms of emerging technology, but it's a discussion that we have to have in terms of money laundering and TF and PF, proliferation financing. And so while we have passed the legislation, we recognize coming out of this session today that we need to do more engagement with the general public, letting people understand what are virtual assets, what does that mean, how does that relate to me, what is this thing about Bitcoin. So we need to intensify the public sensitization with the general public.
Blockchain technology has the capabilities of allowing the transfer of value around the world, I would say quickly and efficiently. And law enforcement agency has reported that illicit traders are using such technology to trade in the cyberspace, where they can do transfer between multiple accounts in multiple jurisdictions using what you call virtual identities. And what they mean by that, the owner of the transaction is not always known. So you can understand how difficult it is for law enforcement to trace a transaction. And due to that emerging risk, the Financial Action Task Force, which you have heard, it's called the FATF, have issued recommendations to deal with such emerging risks. And they have issued recommendation 15 out of the 40 recommendations that have been issued by the Financial Action Task Force.
In addition to that, I think we need to continue our work with the private sector and with the general public in terms of the ownership of this process. This process, while it is being launched and led by the government of St. Lucia, it is a process that affects every one of us. And so we need to get that partnership strengthened.
As a lawyer, it affects the industry because we do a lot of work which may facilitate money laundering. For example, corporate work, trust, property transactions. These are key areas that every lawyer is involved in. So it's really important as a sector that we get on board the bus with NAMLOC, because at the end of the day, it's going to affect the overall risk profile of the country.
What we will notice is that we have what you call an anti-money laundering legislation or money laundering act, and PEPs are captured under that piece of legislation. And PEPs pose if you want of a better word, a high risk to our financial services sector and other business sectors within St. Lucia and any other jurisdiction for that matter. And I think it's very important for us to understand who PEPs are and what risk they can pose to any type of business or any jurisdiction for that matter, in how business is operated, how banks are operated, and what influence they pose on various business sectors that we have. We could look at PEP like we in St. Lucia, so we have domestic PEPs, but we also have to take into consideration international PEPs and PEPs from the region. These are factors that we have to consider as well in our business operations, especially in my field. It's very important. 90% of my clients are overseas people. They're foreign, and we have to also make sure that we can properly identify who those persons are when we're onboarding them. So PEP plays a very key and important role in what we do in our national risk assessment.
The foundation of compliance is know your customer. So we need to understand who our customers are. What sectors do they belong to? What is their profession? What products and services do they want from us? And by understanding that, we will know what's best to offer to the customer. And also that information allows the bank to risk assess the customer, because we use a risk-based approach, meaning we have to identify what sectors or what products and services present a higher risk to the bank. And so therefore we didn't respond accordingly. So if a customer is a high-risk product, might be an online banking. So understanding the exposure to the customer, how do we mitigate that? How do we help the customer to be aware of the risk? And how does the bank on the flip side protect itself and the customer? So we do that by monitoring the transactions. We do that by verifying with the customer. So everything that we do is centered around know your customer and understanding the level of risk that is presented by the type of customer, the nature of their business.
We are also in the preparation of finalizing our report for re-rating. So St. Lucia will be applying for re-rating because we got many of these recommendations that are non-compliant or partially compliant, and we want to improve that rating. So in order to do that, we're doing all of this work with the intention that at the end of that work program, we will be able to apply to improve our ratings, to remove us from enhanced follow-up, where that we will be compliant instead of partially compliant on many of these recommendations.
Listen, I am fed up. You're just asking for more information, more information, more information. What is that all about? You know me, Gassa. I do business all the time.
I'm sorry for the inconvenience, sir. But let me explain to you why we request additional information.
More information, Manita.
So every year, $2 trillion is laundered through legitimate institutions like this bank.
What does that have to do with me?
This laundered money is used to support criminal activity and terrorist activity, and also to finance weapons for mass destruction.
But what that have to do with me putting my money into my account?
Well, because of money laundering, our bank, your bank, is obligated to comply with the International Anti-Money Laundering Regulation.
What's that?
By performing customer due diligence. Essentially just knowing our customers a little better.
You know me.
Your banking patterns and transactions. It's a relationship, and if we fail to comply, the penalties will be severe. Not just for this bank, but for St. Lucia.
If we?
Yes.
I never realized that.
But what's good is that we have an oversight body called NAMLOC.
What's NAMLOC?
The National Anti-Money Laundering Committee. It monitors St. Lucia's compliance with international regulations. The aim is to nip money laundering at its source. You know the old saying, si la pani city wears.
La pani vole.
For further information, contact the Attorney General's Chambers at 468-3200 or visit the National Anti-Money Laundering SLU Facebook page. The NCPC moved another step closer to the full implementation of the Security Interest in Movable Properties Bill, which was passed in Parliament in 2022. The establishment of the Collateral Registry of Movable Assets is vital for the full implementation of this legislation. On this week's Innovators segment, we take in the highlights of a kickstart meeting with the developers of St. Lucia's Collateral Registry.
The Collateral Registry is linked to the Securities Interest in Movable Properties Bill, which was a landmark legislation that passed last year in October. And so this legislation is one that will assist small businesses and individuals in accessing capital.
The Collateral Registry has been a long time coming. It is really being advanced under the Ministry of Finance with a ton of support from the Ministry of Tourism. We are actually the funders of the project, and the funding came from financing for tourism competitiveness improvement under the World Bank. And for our ministry, it really signals a lot. It signals a lot of hope for those persons who didn't otherwise have immovable assets. And a lot of the creative industries and small businesses within the tourism industry who would want to take loans and look for different financing products so that they could improve their tourism products, that it invariably improve the destination. And most times, you know that they need to have immovable assets. But this Collateral Registry brings hope.
Well, the Bar Association has been supportive of the legislative initiative to create the Collateral Registry and the new Security in Movable Assets Bill, which is now an act. We believe that this has been a long time coming. The necessity of ensuring that you have an accurate registry of collateral interest in movable properties will hopefully assist in developing our credit facilities. I know a lot of emphasis has been put on small business, and that's very important, but it'll also benefit large businesses as well. So hopefully it'll benefit the economy as a whole. The fact that you can now accurately record security interests over movable properties, because what has happened in practice is oftentimes is persons will give credit, will try to take collateral over a movable property, and the movable property being movable disappears. But at least with this now, when you have a proper registry, you can track, you can record, and you can accurately take account of your collateral over movable properties, movable assets.
The concern rather would be whether the attorneys, especially our seasoned attorneys, are familiar with the technological developments that are being undertaken, whether they're familiar with simple operating systems, computers, and how to navigate our web-based systems. But fortunately, this is not the first system of that nature that's introduced to St. Lucia, and our attorneys have thus far had a wide buy-in on our court filing system. And I think the access to that system has created the stepping stones to allow for the secure transaction to be very readily accepted by counsel.
Insofar as the court system is concerned, I anticipate that the Department of Deeds and Mortgages will greatly benefit in terms of the increasing the efficiency. But more so, what I think is that the members of the public, they will be the main ones and who will be benefiting from this. It will provide for 24/7 ability to register the items, so there's no more not being able to do something because it's a holiday or we have an off day or the department had to close for any reason whatsoever. So basically, the stakeholders like the banks, banking institutions, and the wider public will be the ones really benefiting from this.
We know that it will really change the landscape of our environment in terms of our tourism product and the creative industries themselves. The small businesses generally in terms of barber shops and hair salons and other small manufacturers and so forth who have equipment and have other facilities that they can use and capitalize will definitely get some relief of it. On our part though, although we're at the phase of instituting the Collateral Registry itself in terms of the hardware and the software, there's still some work that we as a country need to do to ensure that the entire ecosystem for utilizing the Collateral Registry, is up and running.
Our unit provided support to the Ministry of Tourism with the bidding process. This bidding process commenced in May last year with an international competitive tender, followed by a pre-bid meeting. We had a number of firms participating internationally, and the evaluation was completed and tabled before the board in October. An award was made to ESOS. And in this kickoff meeting, what is expected is that they would have come with a full project plan, within that project plan they would include the criteria that would be used for user acceptance testing, and everything from what we can tell is consistent with the bid proposal, the technical proposal that was contained in their bid. So there are no display patches, so I expect that implementation will be just as smooth. In the project plan also, they're also going to give us a few chapters, a few sections on the training, how the training will take place. As you know, if IT development, it's a continuous thing for training, but then there's also going to be some other focus and tailored training for in person. So I am satisfied. I can tell that the firm knows what they are about. The PCU has experience with such systems, having been involved with the procurement of the centralized core banking system for the SLDB.
EOS has been around for 24 years. We are focused on international economic development as a consultancy and as an advisory firm. On this project, we also have involved our affiliate organization, which is EOSoft, which their main focus is on information technology solutions for development. They work on e-government and digital transformation, so they're bringing that expertise to the table, while EOS does much more general types of economic development projects across a wide variety of sectors.
Quite honestly, the moment when we start a project, that's a moment when we start doing the training. Every meeting we use as an opportunity to do some sort of a training. It is very hard initially to explain to the people what the movable asset is or movable property. When you say movable, people think car, maybe boat because you live in an island. But in a country like mine, nobody will think a boat. They will think a car. So you need to explain that everything is a movable property. Ideas are the movable property. That they have a financial volume. But then it depends on to whom do you speak. When you speak with the farmers, there is a different focus. When you speak with the bankers are providers of the services. They provide financial assets. Therefore, the bank needs to be trained in a different way than an end users like the farmers. The farmers need to understand the benefits of a system, but the bankers will be the one, or financial institutions, the businesses will be the one to actually use the system to perform the registration within the system and such.
We have been the first in the OECS in ensuring the implementation of the Collateral Registry as well as the Securities Interest in Movable Properties Bill.
I want to transform St. Lucia.
I want to make my mark.
I want to make a difference.
Through research and innovation, we can transform our country.
Improve the lives of all St. Lucians and give our fair Helen the competitive advantage.
Research calls us to investigate, study, and reach new conclusions,
which allows us to innovate, to create new methods, ideas, products, and technology.
For more information, follow and like us on Facebook at St. Lucia NCPC, the National Competitiveness and Productivity Council, embracing excellence.
On Productivity Insights, we highlight the National Integrated Planning and Program Unit, the NIP, in the Department of Finance, which recently spearheaded a 2-week building condition assessment and asset management train the trainers course at the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College. The workshop comprised modules on best practices from around the world for maintaining public buildings through the conduct of building condition assessments, planning and prioritizing maintenance, and also deriving replacement costs for financial decision making.
I am developing a course for the students to learn how to perform an assessment and valuation on buildings.
We're
we're having a program. It's an asset management engagement. Now, this is not starting today. Really, the genesis of this, it started almost a year and a half ago. It's an engagement with the Ministry of Finance, the World Bank, and we've thought to bring in the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College as part of the overall holistic approach to this.
Of course, and that's what we want to do at Sir Arthur. We teach our students to design better, to build better, to be more aware. All of what we do here is in an effort to ensure that when they get out there, they don't do foolishness. They don't do the usual squatting. They take heed of all of what needs to be, what they need to know so that they can build and design better.
So what does it entail? Asset management. So we're looking at specifically going into building assessments, looking at conditional assessments of buildings. Throughout the years, the government of St. Lucia, this has been a continuous problem. Buildings and their conditions. Eventually, it moves on to sick buildings. So we're taking the scientific approach to this. We want to develop a series of baseline, a strategy where we could attack this at least to create a baseline, get the data that can inform, one, our policymakers, very importantly, but of course our finance technocrats. So when they get submissions from all the agencies who are responsible for taking care of government buildings, they in turn understand the decision-making process and of course the figures that come before them.
We were tasked with assisting the NIP department in developing a tool that they would use to help the decision makers in, providing a tool that they can use to help with decision making. And that had to be based on technical information as well as cost information. So we as the engineers visited 25 buildings, did a physical assessment of them, made a report of the conditions of all these buildings and identified what were the repairs or renovations that needed to be done. So we used two matrices. One is the FCI, Facilities Condition Index. It is a measure of the replacement cost, the repair cost over the replacement cost. And then we married that with the API, which is a priority index. And while you put these two together, you get a plot of what are your important buildings and which ones need more attention. And that gives you a nice graphical tool that makes decision making a lot easier for those in the ministry as well as the higher echelons of decision makers.
With this software and what we have learned today, it will allow agencies now to make more meaningful presentations. So it's not about just saying I need $5 million, but now you have an evidence base as to why you need the $5 million. While where you may have one building that may not be considered a high value in terms of its cost, but rather because it's critical nature of the government operation, of the people of St. Lucia need for that, why it would take a priority over another building that might not be as costly.
In terms of how we look at projects, we have and we just touched on in the assessment that we have the human element, we have what we see and what we perceive, and you look at the building and say, this building needs to be done, right? This because it looks bad, right? But is that really the highest priority, right? We looked at facilities like the archives building, which is never going to be what was the word that was used? It was not going to be one of the juicy projects to undertake, right? But it's very critical to our nation in terms of the information that is stored at those archives, the legacy of the country, right? You have information dating back 200 years in a building that is dilapidated, and we probably never get the attention that you're looking for unless you have this kind of tool to highlight it, buildings like that, as well as our registry, for instance, right? So this tool really puts front and foremost those projects that were always going to remain in the background, right? Unless we have that type of tool.
Oftentimes we see funds are being injected in non-priority items. So this tool will be able to better inform decision making around where to spend money, on what to spend money, in what areas to spend money, and also ultimately into injecting funds into priorities that governments see fit based on their mandate.
Yeah, in the course we cover hazards. Basically, we cover earthquakes, we cover hurricanes, we talk about floodings, and the idea is that the importance to have those databases ready. So in case of an event, you go out and you collect the information about the damages, and you know how much damage has been caused in the structure. And also, the database can serve to inform policymakers, and what are the needs that you need to focus in which building to fix or work on or improve the facilities.
Any operations that we have in government, we look at how can we continue should a disaster happen. How easy is it to move one operations from the other? We saw the examples, for instance, with the passport office. It was not something that was easily removed from one location to the other. And as St. Lucians, we saw the impact it could have had on us if certain steps were not put in place to relocate that operation and to allow that service to continue to the general public. Likewise for any other operations that we have.
So the tool builds upon existing hazard maps that St. Lucia has. Quite often, there are a lot of uncertainties with a lot of the storm events that we're seeing. However, there are maps that are to inform where things are supposed to be built. Unfortunately, a lot of those maps are not publicly available, or they do not reach out to the communities or the people who are most at risk. So as part of the tool, it's really to share that information with not only decision makers, not only technical persons who are attending these meetings, but also to complement this exercise is really to get information out to people who need it most.
The database is such that the information or generated from there can tell you when an asset has reached its point of being obsolete or being considered obsolete. So that too is very critical, because government sometimes can be putting in financial resources that otherwise you consider the opportunity cost that could have gone to other projects, right? So this is all part of what we're hoping that we can stem, what we can control, and resilience on the broader stage. I think resilience, the asset database also gives us a chance to inform, right? Getting information from lessons learned, what we're doing with some of our assets, and to inform, put those towards new builds, informed designing. So the resilience component starts from the design stage all the way into the operational stage.
It's about productivity.
It's a vibe.
It's innovation.
It's about confidence.
It's all about creativity.
It's a competitive spirit.
It's making a difference.
It's problem solving.
It's data driven. It's creativity. It's a very positive mindset.
It's NCPC, baby. It's a vibe. It's a productivity vibe.
The National Competitiveness and Productivity Council. Embracing excellence.
This brings us to the end of another episode of Productivity Vibes, the NCPC's monthly magazine program on what's trending in the areas of productivity and competitiveness. Send us your ideas or suggestions for upcoming programs at stluciancpc@gmail.com and follow us on our Facebook and YouTube channels. See you again next time.